A woman emerges from a barrel, marooned on a remote island, with nothing but the clothes on her back. She curses a man named Samon, who sails away, reassuring his associates that she will be unable to use magic. She proclaims to be the best mage in their clan, that nothing will stop her, except maybe hunger. Revenge isn't easy on an empty stomach. Yoshino Takigawa is confronted at Fuwa Mahiro's family grave. This is the second time today he's been questioned about Mahiro's whereabouts. First by his teacher, and now by some strange woman calling herself Evangeline Yamamoto. He barely considers him a friend anyway. Before he can brush her off, she pulls a gun on him, claiming that a young man was seen saving a girl in a quarantine zone going by the name Fuwa Mahiro. Yoshino admits that her story seems a bit out of character for him. That is, unless she resembles his younger sister, Aika, whom Yoshino is paying his respects to. A butterfly distracts Yoshino, despite having a gun to his head. Make that hundreds, if not thousands of butterflies, in the middle of winter no less. Before the woman can react, Yoshino makes his move, disarming her, just as Mahiro appears, glowing with a blue aura, and gives Yamamoto a literal flying kick to the head. Somehow able to stop bullets in midair, he makes quick work of her and the two escape. The city is done for. As soon as the butterflies appeared, the entire population contracted what the government calls black iron syndrome, according to Mahiro. The people around them begin turning into solid metal. Yoshino was close enough to Mahiro to avoid a similar fate. Why? Because magic, obviously. There's a clan of mages that are trying to awaken some ancient god, and the syndrome is merely a symptom of the ritual they're carrying out. Where did he even learn about magic? From a talking piece of carved driftwood. More precisely, the most powerful mage known to man, Kuzuribe Hakaze, the family's heiress, who is now reduced to speaking through a doll in order to communicate from the remote island where she was left to die. Despite how crazy it sounds, Yoshino believes every word. Mahiro and the mage make a deal. He'll help stop the clan, and in return, she promises to find his sister's killer. He says he'll even save the world in the process, which is definitely out of character for Mahiro. A giant orb rises from beneath the ocean and opens its single eye, which is pretty convincing, if nothing else. Apparently, these orbs have been popping up all over the country and are the fruit of some godlike tree. Hakaze explains that there's a mage clan, the Kuzuribe, who had a power struggle, which is why Samon marooned her on an island where she is unable to use magic, besides the doll. They go to the spot where Aika died so that Hakaze can help track the killer using the talismans she left scattered around the country. They allow anyone who touches them to use the limited magical power stored within. Mahiro takes a silver dagger and stabs the floor where Aika's body was found. The murder took place a year ago, so it will take some time to pick up the killer's trail. He gives Yoshino a few talismans, warning him to be wary if any butterflies appear. They part ways, since there's no point in Yoshino sticking around. Besides, Aika didn't like him anyway, and he has a girlfriend to worry about. But little does Mahiro know, the two are one and the same. She liked Yoshino more than she let on. Yamamoto regains consciousness and follows Yoshino. He touches one of the talismans and sends them both flying into a storefront across the street. Picking up the handgun she dropped, he tries to escape, but becomes trapped in his school. A mage wielding a spear appears while Mahiro and Hakaze argue. Despite her warning not to fight him head-on, that's exactly what he does. In an attempt to smoke Yoshino out, Yamamoto drives him to the roof, where he doesn't hesitate to give her a warning shot, surprised at how calm he is holding a gun. She tries to make a run at him, but instead, he tackles her, teleporting them over the edge. She's terrified after he barely breaks their fall, using magic. Yoshino can't abandon Mahiro and decides to make a deal with Yamamoto. While they walk, she realizes that his girlfriend was Fuwa Aika. Both he and Mahiro don't accept the absurd circumstances of her death, but maybe he can find the reason behind it in a world where time is out of joint. Mahiro is not doing so hot against Natsumura, one of Samon's henchmen, when Yoshino shows up to help. The princess tells them to retreat immediately, but Mahiro grows tired of her nagging, so he throws Yoshino the doll so she can explain how magic works to him and runs to face off against the spear-wielding mage. She dispels his worries about offensive magic. The Kuzuribe can only use defensive magic. It's meant to maintain the logic of the world, to repair, heal, and manage it. So instead, he uses a force field at the end of his weapon, sort of like shield bashing someone. The magic comes from the Tree of Genesis, requiring both the invocation of a clan member and an offering, anything that is a product of civilization. The more complex the offering, the more powerful the magic. Mahiro figures out pretty quickly that he can cause damage without a weapon by using the same technique on his own body. It still doesn't stop him from getting thrown around or protect him completely from injury though. He's reminded of his sister and refuses to give up, taking a gun from a metallized cop while accidentally leaving his phone on the bus. The government sends in helicopters to destroy the tunnels and bridges in an effort to quarantine the city. In one of the tunnels, Mahiro and Natsumura have a standoff. He fires the gun at a gas tank, confident the explosion will do the trick. It's a good thing Yoshino shows up after finding Mahiro's bloody phone on the bus, using healing magic to track him. The two book it out of the tunnel, just as the choppers take aim and collapse the bridge. Hakaze is impressed with Yoshino's quick thinking. She narrows the identity of the killer down. It's a member of the Kuzuribe clan. The duo takes a bus out to the countryside to search for more talismans and wait for more fruit to appear so they can triangulate their trajectory. When butterflies suddenly appear, Yoshino attempts to save the few people in the area, but doesn't reach a pair of kids in time. Hakaze and Yoshino talk about their relationship while Mahiro takes a bath. They've known each other since middle school, though they weren't technically friends. Mahiro was a rich kid, which isolated him from the others. After getting run over by a motorcycle, in an apparent accident, Yoshino is forced to visit him in the hospital with their teacher. Due to his status, Mahiro suspects it was a hit job and asks Yoshino for help since the adults won't believe him. It turns out he was right. Yoshino investigates and finds a connection between the cyclist and the chauffeur. They plotted revenge after Mahiro's father sacked the chauffeur, but Yoshino never wanted anything to do with him. After that, the two were always paired up. While Mahiro is alone, Hakaze poses the same question, to which he responds, "There was some stupid stuff that happened." And then the stupid punchline was Yoshino announcing to the class the real reason he was run over. He was selflessly saving a puppy, which is when people stopped fearing him for his status and began to warm up to him. Mahiro reiterates that Yoshino is a vicious person, but he concedes he might not have made it this far without him. Samon knows the two of them are catching up and have already triangulated the Tree of Exodus location from the fruit's trajectory. Another clan member, Tetsuma, who shares the same concerns about the princesses, Hakaze's interference, travels to the next stash of talismans since they always tracked her movements just in case. The princess's confidence stems from the protection granted to her by the Tree of Genesis, but something feels off to Yoshino. Samon and the rest of the clan also draw on its power, so why revive the Tree of Exodus and trap the princess on an island? In an aquarium, Yoshino has flashbacks to a date he and Aika had in a similar aquarium. She always quoted Hamlet, believing everything happens for a reason, though this aquarium is abandoned and the fish turned to iron. They find the talismans just as Tetsuma waltzes through the doors. Hakaze questions why the clan would rebel against their purpose of reviving the Tree of Genesis. Tetsuma replies that she's become oblivious by imposing her will on the others. It's better if she dies on that island. One of the talismans they retrieve is the exact same necklace that Aika gave Yoshino, making him question the veracity of fate. Maybe she was right, but why then was she brutally murdered? Mahiro devises a plan to flood the place and threaten to electrocute Tetsuma and his henchmen, allowing the duo to escape without facing a real mage head-on. Hakaze sends them to meet Junichiro, who's holding onto a special talisman that will turn the tide in their favor. Only one obstacle stands in their way, the secret password. Boobs that don't shake aren't boobs at all. They're in. But they find it strange how Junichiro talks about the princess in the past tense until he claims that she's been dead this whole time. He verified the body himself, even though all that remains is her skeleton. He doesn't want to know their plans, since he's neutral in the clan's dispute and isn't actually a true member of the clan and can't use magic. The two of them ruminate on this new development while riding the bus. Out of nowhere, the ground starts shaking and there's a sudden influx of butterflies. people begin turning to iron as another one of the Tree of Exodus' giant orb-like fruits emerges from beneath the earth. Mahiro tells the bus driver to floor it. He'll be safe as long as he's near them. The princess gives them permission to move in on Samon's location. Meanwhile, Natsumura meets with Junichiro and asks him to join their side and give up on remaining neutral. Junichiro levels him with ease and warns him that Samon wouldn't appreciate his actions. Junichiro wonders whether Mahiro and Yoshino are aware that the Tree of Genesis has a higher likelihood of ending the world. Yoshino is taken off guard that night when Mahiro asks if he knew Aika had a boyfriend. Hoping he hadn't been found out despite all the evidence right under Mahiro's nose, he replies that he couldn't picture it, wondering if his face gave anything away. They open the briefcase to discover the special talisman is a gun wrapped in chains, which seems odd given that the others have all been trinkets more or less. The princess says that the tree absorbs the weapons anyway, so it still upholds order through their destruction. Mahiro can't see through Yoshino's thinly veiled disguise, or even recognize his own feelings, but he can make astute observations apparently. They're surrounded by armed soldiers. The two jump into action, but Mahiro gets knocked out and Yoshino is taken. Although it's not against his will, he's made a deal to obtain some insurance, as well as a handgun in case things go south. The government agency's forces plan to launch a full assault on the Tree of Exodus. Mahiro saves Yoshino from his captors, but seems not to suspect him in any way. The two decide to rest in an abandoned bus for the night, and Yoshino wonders what Mahiro will do after getting his revenge, while Mahiro wonders why Yoshino always stares at his phone. Yoshino dreams about the time he, Aika, and Mahiro spent at their summer home, trying to keep their relationship from Mahiro, but suddenly wakes up to the special talisman's barrel pointed right at his head. Mahiro laughs and tells him to get ready to head out. Samon notices the forces approaching. There's practically an army marching on the location of the Tree of Exodus. It's too soon. He wasn't expecting they'd find him and launch an assault that fast. He orders the mages to focus their energy on maintaining the shield instead of concealing their position when he's informed that the barrier has been breached by the duo aiding Hakaze. Samon intercepts them. Standing beside a barrel, he tries to explain that all the destruction thus far was due to the Tree of Genesis trying to halt the Tree of Exodus reawakening. Since it feeds on the innovation and fruits of a civilization, it has the potential to consume everything. The breakdown of logic and order will cause the Tree of Genesis to hit the reset button on the entire civilized world. Samon poses the question of whether Mahiro is willing to destroy the world, but he already knew about the possibility of the collapse of civilization, and doesn't care either way. He just wants the princess back, so he can find the killer and avenge Aika. But Samon retorts with the possibility that she's already dead, opening the barrel and revealing the skeleton Junichiro confirmed as Hakaze's. To prove his point, he asks the princess what year it is, and her response shocks Yoshino and Mahiro. She's 2 years off, and by her own count, has only been on the island for 4 months. It seems like time really is out of joint. To avoid enacting the Tree of Genesis' wrath by killing her himself, Samon left her to the elements and waited for nature to do it for him. Yoshino is about to give up and hand over the talismans when Mahiro makes a new deal. If Samon can find his sister's killer, then he won't pull the trigger. He agrees. But when he learns that it's someone within the clan, he doesn't believe that anyone would willingly give up their magic by using it for destruction. Yoshino picks up the doll to speak with the princess. When she mentions Hamlet, he has another flashback to a time when Aika was alive. Revenge, a mage, an island, a tragedy that doesn't end in tragedy, the Tempest. Natsumura meets Yamamoto on the battlefield, but she has the talismans that Yoshino gave her, and she won't make it easy for him, even if it's the last thing she does. Samon is baffled when Yoshino tells Mahiro he will reveal the identity of Aika's boyfriend if he changes his mind and helps the princess, or at least hears him out until Samon can find the killer. Not even the princess can believe her ears. The whole fate of the world is in the balance, and the mere mention of a boyfriend completely changes everything? Yoshino reasons that they must have been in the Tree of Genesis' favor, or else everything up to that point would have been pure coincidence. And that's even more ridiculous than the events themselves. Yamamoto goes head-to-head with Natsumura to save the enemy artillery from disintegration and hopefully buy enough time to stop the tree's revival. Yoshino goes on to argue, with the help of Mahiro, that Simone's plan was to make the princess lose all hope when she found out about already being dead by the time they got to the tree and being powerless to fulfill her bargain and aid in its destruction. That is exactly what he planned on, creating any disadvantage he could to render the princess helpless. But they haven't quite figured everything out. How does he plan to bring her back then? Wouldn't a time paradox be created? Samon built in redundancy and thinks he has them beat, but Yoshino proposes that she was trapped in stasis for 2 years before even going to the island without realizing it, so she would believe it without question. Despite being wrong, he makes Samon drop his sword, unable to believe this kid is actually convincing Mahiro. He has no idea what's happening right now. So Yoshino asks for proof of this time prison Samon swears exists. It doesn't matter though. If the talisman is activated, then he'll have to bring back the princess himself regardless. He comes up with a plan to prove the time shift. The princess can carve something into the barrel, and if it shows up in the future, they'll have no choice but to accept the truth. It doesn't matter though. Yoshino's gambit was to make Samon panic. Hakaze details how the dolls work. They must be roughly the same size and shape, and imbued with some piece of the caster. She soaked them in her own blood. They already have a piece of the princess, in the shape of a human, her skeleton. Samon is completely hopeless now. They've figured out his failsafe to bring the princess back. Meanwhile, Junichiro stops Natsumura for questionable reasons despite his neutrality in the matter. Samon plays his last hand, admitting that he hid an offering on the island, great enough to transport her body onto her skeleton in the future. Despite this, he tries to convince Mahiro that this is all the Tree of Genesis' fault. It must have caused Aika's death, and brought Yoshino and him here to save Hakaze. Junichiro convinces both Natsumura and Yamamoto that the fight is pointless, and that if he doesn't heal her, then he becomes a murderer, which is a serious offense within the clan. The killer would lose their ability to use magic. Forgiveness must be asked of the tree through a ritual for which a high-ranking official determines whether it would be performed. The princess corroborates this, but if it were to happen, then they would not be caught in the web of magic after all. Samon uses this to try and convince Mahiro that it's all too convenient for the princess. Obviously, fate favors her, but what if fate favored him? Remembering his sister quoting the Tempest, Mahiro calls out both Yoshino and Samon for trying to buy time. Samon was stalling until the investigation results came back. If he brought the killer, then there would be no reason to tempt him to join his side and not Hakaze's. The whole time, trying to revive the Tree of Exodus before any action was taken. Samon receives a call telling him that it wasn't a member of the clan who murdered Aika. No one had done anything illogical. Everyone is shocked. While Mahiro begins to lose it, the princess has a revelation. Since she serves the Tree of Genesis, the only other person who could escape the web would be the mage serving the Tree of Exodus. Since trying to revive the Tree of Exodus, the one who serves it must have been unleashed. It's the princess's duty to decide when to revive the Tree of Genesis, which most likely means it's the Tree of Exodus mage who must approve its revival. Mahiro figures that if it was the Exodus mage, then Simon's logic falls apart and his argument has no weight. He falls to his knees in defeat, unable to accept that the princess now has the upper hand. On the battlefield, Junichiro and the others watch as the Tree of Genesis rapidly grows, tendrils protruding out of the earth, surrounding the Tree of Exodus. But he doesn't believe Hakaze approved it yet. Mahiro hesitates. What kind of reversal of fortune goes this well? Samon might be involved, but the Tree of Genesis could have faked the existence of the mage. There's too much uncertainty, but even still, Yoshino prays that Mahiro will at least give the princess a chance. It could take hours to find the talisman, and by that time, the Tree of Exodus could very well be revived. If the Tree of Genesis really could produce miracles, then why hadn't... Just as Hakaze begins to doubt, an unarmed missile drops from the sky. But if it could do this, it could kill someone just as easily. They prepare the skeleton and items for the transfer, as the princess swears to help find Aika's killer for all the help Mahiro and Yoshino offered her, despite never really knowing the truth. She promises him that if the Tree of Genesis is the killer, then he can take her life. The Tree of Genesis breaks through the barrier, but the Tree of Exodus retaliates. It looks like it has the edge in this battle. However, the Tree of Genesis seems to be reviving all over the world as trunks begin popping up everywhere before Hakaze can even attempt to stop either. A tendril slices Yoshino's torso vertically, while another branch pierces Mahiro's chest. The princess doesn't think twice about using the special talisman to try and revive Yoshino, while ordering Simone to revive Mahiro. Nobody knows what these ancient godlike trees are, or what they are truly capable of. Even those who harness their power have no idea what they've unleashed upon the world. While Yoshino is visiting his missing friend Mahiro's family grave, a year after his girlfriend, Mahiro's adopted sister Aika, was murdered, a contractor working with the government to investigate the Black Iron Syndrome confronts him. Mahiro saves him by using magic talismans that Hakaze led him to. She's been marooned on an island by fellow clansman Samon. He's trying to awaken the Tree of Exodus, despite their clan's purpose to awaken the Tree of Genesis, two mysterious godlike entities. Yoshino and Mahiro team up to stop Samon and help Hakaze in return for finding Aika's murderer. Before they succeed, new information comes to light, and both are suddenly attacked by the Tree of Exodus. Mahiro lies in a pool of his own blood, butterflies covering his face, waking with a start to find himself at home, on his couch, with Aika sitting in the chair next to him, reading The Tempest. Back in the field, he sees a young Yoshino asking if he really thinks their journey has to end in sadness, a tragedy. Weren't they supposed to save the world? He remembers the events leading up to this point, believing he's dead. Back on the couch, Aika reminds him that the story doesn't end in tragedy. He awakens in the hospital to young Yoshino explaining how the Tree of Exodus backed off as the Tree of Genesis began sprouting branches around the globe, turning deserts into farmland and cleaning the oceans. It doesn't make sense to Mahiro. Suddenly, he's at the Kuzuribe mansion's front gates, walking into the murder scene of his adopted sister. Screaming, he wakes up one last time when Samon enters the room. He's been in a magically induced coma for the past month. Mahiro wonders why he's still alive, but Samon only asks whether he's capable of killing Yoshino. On a break at a construction site, two boys discuss the reports and rumors floating around about the Mage of Exodus. One of the boys casually remarks that they must be referring to him and demonstrates his abilities to his coworker. What if he ends up having to save the world? Samon asks him again if he could kill Yoshino, requesting that Mahiro hear him out. Samon is working with Yamamoto, Natsumura, and Takumi, the prior assistant director of the task force at Mount Fuji. They're worried about Hakaze becoming too close to Yoshino, who is the only person she allows to accompany her, wanting to see the effects of the Tree of Genesis with her own eyes. They spread rumors about the Mage of Exodus, trying to smoke them out. Meanwhile, the Mage is more worried about his ex than the Exodus. Visiting the Fuwa family grave, Hakaze asks to meet Aika's boyfriend due to her growing feelings of guilt surrounding the tree and her culpability regarding Aika's death. She fears its power now. In just 7 days, the tree absorbed the metallicized bodies while eradicating social issues with only a small part of the tree awakened. Samon is afraid of how much sway Yoshino has with the princess. Even Hakaze wonders about her true feelings for Yoshino. But upon reflection, she becomes frustrated and goes to confront him when she sees him speaking with the guy from the construction site. He's asking Yoshino about getting to Mount Fuji, where the Tree of Exodus has taken root, when Hakaze walks up and gives him a flying kick to the face, claiming to have had a bad feeling about him. The boy wonders if they know about the rumors. Not only do they know about them, they know who spread them, prompting him to reveal his powers, since they obviously know more than he does. They go to a restaurant to talk. His name is Hanemura Megumu. He hasn't always been the Mage of Exodus. His power grew stronger about a year ago as the Tree of Exodus awoke. Hakaze uses her own magic, surprising Hanemura, not knowing other mages exist, let alone ones serving the Tree of Genesis. The princess challenges him to spar to test the limits of his abilities. Hakaze creams Hanemura. His magic is stronger than hers, but he doesn't have a killer's intent. Samon and the others worry that Yoshino might be the Mage of Exodus, and Mahito agrees to help them when Yamamoto gets an unexpected call from Yoshino saying they found the Mage of Exodus. When Yamamoto and Natsumura meet with Hanemura, he takes them off guard by using magic without any offerings. Upon destroying a branch from the Tree of Genesis, they kidnap him, fearing his power. Mahito questions him about the death of his sister, since the Mage of Exodus is still the prime suspect. Hanemura has an alibi, though he refuses to let them speak with his girlfriend, fearing for her safety. That and the fact that they recently broke up. So, Mahito challenges him to a fight to see if he's putting on an act. Yamamoto and Takumi learn of a foreign agent investigating the Kuzuribe clan. Junichiro meets up with Yoshino and Hakaze. When he's alone with the princess, he wonders if she knows that she's in love with Yoshino. From her reaction, it's clear she doesn't, until she fantasizes about him aloud, quickly realizing he's right. Junichiro tells Hakaze that if she wills it, the Tree of Genesis might kill his girlfriend, which shouldn't be a problem though, since she's already dead, unbeknownst to her. Samon and Takumi plan a public display to show off Hanemura's powers. Hakaze begins overthinking what Junichiro said, trying to avoid that outcome at all costs. Samon and co. alert the media before putting on a superfluous display for the Mage of Exodus debut on the world stage, though they still believe that Yoshino has the heart of Exodus, like Hakaze and Genesis. The princess decides to visit the Kuzuribe village to cool off and investigate the alleged spy. Yoshino tags along, but the princess avoids any interaction with Yoshino that might endanger his girlfriend. There's a rumor of a ghost showing up in the village, but it might be a ploy to draw out the clan's magic. While quoting Hamlet, Yoshino has flashbacks to his time dating Aika, while Hakaze tries to get more information about his girlfriend. Without warning, the village temple is set on fire and the bridge destroyed. The spy takes a child hostage to force the clan to use magic. Trying to save the girl, Yoshino uses a chain and rope as a zipline. Hakaze almost uses magic to save him when the rope breaks, but he makes it to the other side, saving the girl. Despite his efforts, Hakaze uses magic to save Yoshino from a burning beam, exposing the clan. Yamamoto, Satsuma, and Natsumura watch the whole thing, still thinking it's a part of Yoshino and the Heart of Exodus master plan. Takumi regains his government position after the rumors of the Mage catch on, along with his unique position and knowledge of magic. While dressed as a pseudo-superhero, Hanemura starts to garner public attention around the world, destroying the Tree of Genesis branches. Hakaze tries to figure out what Yoshino's girlfriend is like in a bid to change her feelings for him, but it backfires, only making her want him more. Debates have begun surrounding whether the Mage of Exodus is a force for good and whether the Tree of Genesis should be destroyed, sparking controversy. Samon reveals his theory that the Heart of Exodus has separated from the Mage. While Hanemura can use magic, Yoshino influences the will of the tree, unlike Hakaze, who has both. They try to brainstorm who Yoshino's girlfriend is in case they need to use her against him. Hakaze can't take it anymore and confesses her love for Yoshino and how she's afraid of accidentally killing his girlfriend through the Tree of Genesis. He tells her the truth. How can she kill someone who died a year ago? Meanwhile, Hanemura comes to the same conclusion. His girlfriend was Aika. That's why he's been hiding her identity. Mahito immediately dismisses it, but nobody has ever heard her voice or even seen his girlfriend before. Hakaze is distraught, thinking it's her fault she died. She becomes frustrated that he isn't, but Yoshino knows nothing will change if he gets mad. He can't do anything about it. He's been hiding his feelings for so long that he doesn't know what to do and breaks down. Samon sends Junichiro to make sure the princess doesn't do anything rash if she finds out about Aika and Yoshino, but he's too late. She wonders if she wills the tree's destruction, will it simply cease to exist? Hakaze hatches a plan, locking Junichiro up so he doesn't interfere. When the Mage of Exodus appears again, another magic user steps in. It's the princess. She's trying to test Hanemura's limits to see if he can really pull it off, and ends up retreating. He still isn't ready. Yoshino figures it's time he confesses to Mahito about Aika and goes to look for him. The dancing princess is garnering attention from the government. Samon and company decide to regroup with her, though she finds them first and almost totals their car. Apparently, she's tiring Hanamura out, but not as much as Junichiro, who's taken up training him. Yamamoto tells the princess about her theory. The Tree of Genesis is really a weapon that was sent to the planet to test the advancement of civilization. But why would something with malicious intent allow Hakaze to maintain control over it? Yamamoto still thinks that Yoshino is the true Mage of Exodus. Surprisingly, the princess says that might not be such a bad thing. Mahito goes to the graveyard where his family plot is. He sees Yoshino coming with a bag of takeout and decides to leave before he gets there, claiming he's been looking for him. How could they have missed it? After the younger sister perishes in Hamlet, her brother and suitor meet in a graveyard. Yoshino calmly tells him that he was Aika's boyfriend, but Mahito's reaction isn't what he was expecting. Mahito didn't really know her, never even acknowledged her as his sister while she was alive. Despite quoting the Tempest, Mahito still refuses to forgive her killer, still bent on revenge, finally admitting that he was in love with her after all. Samon receives the news that the two reconciled, but doesn't feel relieved. If anything, it's even more confusing. Hakaze and Yoshino move into the apartment where everyone else is staying. Hakaze reveals her plan to discover Aika's killer. She's going to travel back in time to witness her death firsthand. They dig up the barrel and the doll from the wreckage at Mount Fuji, but Samon worries that Hakaze could be the murderer, while she thinks it might be someone inconsequential, leaving no room for Mahito's revenge. There's no way to prevent her death without completely changing the world as it is now. The princess was isolated on a desert island for 2 years, so it's safe to assume she won't affect the future simply by traveling back in time. She uses the offering Samon left as a failsafe on the island to return to Japan close to the time of Aika's murder. While she's in the past, Hanamura is finally strong enough to beat Junichiro, while tensions rise surrounding the two trees. Public opinion is split in defense of both. If they successfully destroy the Tree of Genesis, it could cause an international conflict due to the prosperity that followed its arrival. In the past, Hakaze returns to Japan and almost immediately runs into Aika walking down the street. Aika wonders why she's been staring at her, so the princess makes a terrible excuse and runs away. She uses magic, escaping to the roof of a building. Talking to herself out loud, she's taken by surprise when Aika interrupts her after hearing her mention both Mahito and Yoshino. Aika deduces that she must be a mage serving the Tree of Genesis, but how could she possibly know? Unless she introduces herself as Fuwa Aika, the one they call the Mage of Exodus, materializing a sword out of thin air to prove it. A huge branch of the Tree of Genesis appears in the middle of the ocean back in the future. Hakaze explains the situation to Aika, who understands the inevitability of her death. It's even necessary for the Tree of Genesis to be destroyed. If it survives, civilization will be reset within the next 10 years. Takumi assembles a team to investigate Yamamoto's theory, coming to a fairly accurate conclusion. It's a test. If a civilization can destroy the Tree of Genesis, they break the cycle, fearing this has been going on far longer than they realize. Aika explains that the Tree of Exodus is the sword able to destroy the Tree of Genesis, which can only happen if civilization has advanced enough to pass the test. Since Aika is the Mage of Exodus, the only way to set things in motion and successfully destroy the Tree of Genesis is if she sacrifices herself. She was the killer all along. But Hakaze is furious that she could be so callous as to make such a huge world-altering decision, one that will test both Mahito and Yoshino's limits, endanger their lives, and cause them immense pain. She refuses to allow everything to end in tragedy. Aika fancies herself as Ophelia, but after the princess protests, she compares them to Caliban. They are merely slaves to their respective tree gods. She tells Hakaze not to worry about Mahito and Yoshino. They'll understand. But Hakaze says she's the one who doesn't understand. She made Yoshino weep over her loss. Upon hearing this, Aika rocks the princess in the jaw for making Yoshino cry, but Hakaze won't stand for it and begins attacking her. The reason mages serving the Tree of Genesis can only use defensive magic is to make the tree seem benevolent. Hakaze goes all out, threatening to kill her, but her magic is powerless against that of Exodus, which has no limits. Aika breaks through the princess's strongest defenses with her bare hands, knocking her out. Upon finding Aika's body, Hakaze notices the notes she left at the scene, instructing her to give them to Mahito and Yoshino after destroying the Tree of Genesis. The princess flees in tears, knowing that she had a hand in Aika's death, no matter how small, regardless of its inevitability. The government decides to protect the Tree of Genesis, making the Mage of Exodus an enemy of the state. Samon accompanies Hakaze while recovering the letters she hid in the past. The princess relays the events leading up to Aika's death. Instead of the reaction everyone expects, Mahito believes her. And if Aika believed what she was doing was right, then he can't blame her. Yoshino wishes she had discussed it with them, but understands her decision as well. They even apologize for putting the princess in such a difficult position, but she demands to know why they don't blame her or hold her responsible. They are as much to blame as she is. It was Aika's decision, not anyone else's. Samon and Yamamoto are thankful that both are able to handle the truth and maintain their composure. Hanemura, on the other hand, throws a table across the room and berates Mahito for not being angry about it. How can they accept it so easily? He gives Mahito a suplex while gut-punching Yoshino, sending him flying and cracking a window. Mahito asks him if he even understands their current situation. He's the one who has to destroy the tree still. No matter how much they scream or cry, it won't change anything. They can't open the letter otherwise. Yoshino asks the princess if she could heal him, as blood pours from his mouth and he collapses. Even though it was just one punch, man, that's a lot of damage. In the middle of the ocean, military ships surround the Tree of Genesis in a circle at a distance of 20 kilometers, while 3 survey ships stay within a few hundred meters. They must avoid casualties or run the risk of starting an international conflict. The nations stationed around the aberration are in preparation for a confrontation with the mages, since they support the Tree of Creation's conservation. If they attempt complete annihilation, it may be viewed as an invasion by people plotting an insurrection, and they should expect immediate retaliation. Upon inspection of the situation, it seems to call for subterfuge and misdirection to hide their intentions. Mahiro's machinations direct him to a solution he believes is their best option while remaining non-combative with innocent civilians. Though met with some opposition, they don't have time for much discussion, as the mission requires some discretion, so they pay attention to his proposition. Apparently, the mages can't use magic within a certain proximity to the pillar. Only Hanemura has the ability to destroy the tree. The others can only lend aid from some distance away. Yoshino and Mahito remember the first time they met Aika. They drop formalities and end up using each other's given name. She's embarrassed to find out she's already been calling Yoshino by his first name, surprising her when he calls her Aika. She thinks it's for the better to have them around. They could make any tragedy seem like a comedy. Samon informs Takumi that Mahito and Yoshino are coming along on the mission. Hanemura tries to give Mahito a letter for his ex in case he doesn't make it, but he immediately rips it up, telling him that nobody is dying. It is Mahito's plan after all, and Yoshino doesn't want to miss out. They're both using it as a suicide mission, in Aika's honor, not expecting to return. This upsets Hakaze. She's completely against Yoshino involving himself and putting himself in danger. The plan: they'll make a stand 10 kilometers from the cruisers, where the mages can use magic, while Hanemura takes Mahito and Yoshino to the survey boats, since they're non-combatants. Hakaze is not okay with Yoshino's involvement. She doesn't want to put the man she loves in harm's way. He's finally getting over Aika. She had to act alone to protect the ones she loved. Now he wants to help protect the ones he cares about, instead of staying on the sidelines. Hakaze will disguise herself as the Mage of Exodus and attack the fleet when Hanemura shows up as the dancing princess to protect them, convincing them he's on their side. Meanwhile, Mahito, Yamamoto, Junichiro, and Yoshino will commandeer the survey ships as the fleet is lured within range of Satsuma, who takes over the role of dancing princess, while Hanemura makes it to the tree. Having no clue what to do, one of the passengers gets hold of a gun and fires, hitting Yoshino. The Kuzuribe clan tries their best to protect the ships, but the Tree of Genesis fights back. Tendrils shoot from beneath the sea, attacking the ships left and right. Hanemura is powerless to do anything against a god. Back at Mount Fuji, the Tree of Exodus begins cracking. A red glow emanates from within. With everyone's will focused on destroying the tree, Yoshino and Mahito remind themselves what Aika would do in this moment, bolstering their confidence. The Tree of Exodus transforms into a giant glowing blade, and Hanemura's resolve returns. Beating back the hostile roots, he uses the sword to slice through the heart of the tree, in a vertical slash cutting the entire length of the tree, releasing glowing blue petals that turn into ethereal butterflies. As, in a similar fashion, the tree's branches around the world disappear. With both trees inexplicably disappearing, along with the Kuzuribe clan's magic, large-scale international incidents seem to be avoided for the most part, despite crime rates returning to normal, as if the trees were never there to begin with. Mahito and Yoshino watch the video left by Aika, telling them to move on and live their lives however they choose. She felt compelled by her status as the Mage of Exodus to carry out its will, but they aren't bound by such things. They say their final goodbyes at the Fuwa family's grave. Mahito decides to meet up with the girl he saved from the Black Iron Syndrome, pointing out the princess struggling with her suitcase. Yoshino runs to her, and they embrace. It's a new beginning, not the end of a tragedy after all. Thank you for sticking until the end. Subscribe for more videos like this.